Hello, everybody, and welcome to another live stream episode of the OSINT Curious live stream or podcast if you're listening to it there. Hello, everybody. I am Michael Hoffman. I'm thrilled to be here with some of my wonderful colleagues within the OSINT Curious world. So let's get your voices on this. Riku, why don't you say hi to everybody? Tell us who you are.
Hey everyone, I'm Ritu Gill. Some of you know me from Twitter as OSINT Techniques, and I'm happy to be here and glad that you guys are here as well.
Cool. Christina?
Hi everyone, my name is Cristina Lecate, same name on Twitter, of course. Not of course actually, but it's the same. And I'm also very happy to be here with the team of OSINT Curious and everybody else that is watching us.
Yeah, it's really cool. Like when your name is the same as your handle, it makes it so much easier.
Yeah, I say it twice.
Cool. All right, Stephen, why don't you say hi to everybody?
Hi everyone, I'm Stephen Harris, better known as Nick Zintel. I've had a great week with some of you guys already, and I'm looking forward to spending this evening with you too.
Yeah, we're going to talk about that in just a second. Gumshoe, why don't you say hey?
Hey everybody, John Turbush. I'm the Gumshoe on Twitter, and that's all you need to know.
That's all she wrote. Cool. Well, thank you so much for being here, OSINT Curious members, and thank you to the community that is joining now. I see that we've got a bunch of regulars here, Adam and Zwenzek. Welcome. And for those of you that don't know, we're doing this live stream. The application we're using is sending things out to 3 different platforms, to Twitch, to YouTube, and to Twitter or Periscope. And you can join us at any one of those 3 applications, your choice. And if you want, you can interact with our live stream by sending us comments, and we will sometimes incorporate those into our conversation here. So this is meant to be interactive. We want to hear from you and your thoughts. So send us some good thoughts here in the chat. So our first topic, we're going to cover 3 things today. The first thing is OSINT Curious. I got to stop naming everything OSINT, right? It's like OSINT Summit, OSINT Curious, OSINT plush dolls. We have to make some OSINT teddy bears. I don't even know what those are, but
OSINT swag.
Yeah, exactly. OSINT swag. So I know that John, you were at the OSINT Summit with me, and I know that Nix, you were there, and Christina and Ritu, I think you two had joined us. Man, I was just blown away by the response from the community and just the amazing talks. Did you have any things that stood out for you about that conference?
Who starts? Stephen, start.
Yeah, I think one of the takeaways from it was, I guess, I don't know how many talks there were across the 2 days. I guess maybe 15, 16 talks, I guess, but just how wide the area of OSINT is. Like we had stuff from journalists, we had cyber threat intelligence people, we had like law enforcement people, just like the scope of it was huge, and there's a ton of stuff to take in from it. But yeah, that's my takeaway, because you can have this idea that OSINT is this maybe tiny range of small things, but actually when you look at who's doing it in different areas, it's massive.
Yeah, that was one of the things that we looked at when we were picking the talks with the OSINT Summit board, was that diversity. We wanted to make sure that whether somebody's doing fraud analysis or whether they're doing cyber, they were welcome, and they knew that they were going to, there was going to be stuff for them there.
And we talked about that summit. The summit, we did a poll, and we had an idea of what kind of work different people that attended or just had access to the poll were doing, and it was a pretty widespread of people like that.
It was.
And the engagement on Slack was quite amazing, I thought. And not only that, just seeing how many people are new to OSINT and the interest there. I was very curious about that, and wanting to help out, and we all learn from each other. But I thought that was actually interesting, and I tweeted about it, where it's like, hey, if you're new to OSINT, what are some basics, or what are some basic things you can start with? Because it can be very overwhelming and challenging to keep up with all the OSINT things out there.
Yeah, absolutely. I
Yeah.
mean, with all of the Start Me pages and websites and blogs and videos and live streams that are out there now, it can definitely be overwhelming for people that are getting in. There used to be several on-roads into OSINT, right? You would take this person's course, you would go to that person's forums, and you would get that warm, welcoming, safe environment. Now there's so many places to start.
Yeah, and it can be tricky to even point someone now to a specific direction because it depends on what they need to use OSINT for sometimes. Yes, there are some basics that apply to everyone, but then you kind of adopt a different angle depending on your work. And you might need different tools and different methodology. Not the methodology, actually, is pretty much the same.
Well, but you have different processes that you do, right?
Yeah.
I mean, somebody that's doing due diligence and business OSINT is not going to be in Shodan and Census necessarily.
Yeah.
But yeah, good point. Other thoughts?
About the OSINT Summit, I really love the diversity of the people and the fact that we had not only different topics, but also different points of view because we had an international speakers list, right?
Yeah. And we have people from Brazil and Australia and just all over.
And we have discussed this between us as well and in previous webcasts as well. And we were saying that the type of OSINT that you do in the US is going to be completely different from the type of OSINT we do in Europe.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're going to say, John? Get as many people from as many different walks of life as possible there. And obviously there's more to be done of that in many ways. But I think, it was a good start. We could see people from all over the world there doing all different kinds of work.
Yeah. And one of the things that I loved was the variety. I mean, it was all about variety in my mind. There were different, not only different topics about automation or about dark web or about whatever, but there was also different levels, right? You had some really technical talks that I'm going to have to go back and watch a couple of times to really get the most out of. And then you had some that were more about process. And I think that was fabulous, just fabulous. Cool. All right. Well, thank you for being there. And those of you that haven't heard, there were about 12,000 people that signed up for the OSINT Summit, and we are absolutely thrilled with that. And it was recorded. For those of you that were not able to make it, if you signed up, then your recordings will be probably next week placed in your SANS OSINT Summit portal page. If you didn't sign up, I believe in the coming weeks, they're going to be chopping up each of those talks and pushing them up to YouTube as well. So stay tuned for that. Well, let's move on to our second topic. Now, this is a topic that's kind of near and dear to, I know some of you are like, no, Micah, please don't make me talk about my personal stuff. But this is some stuff that's out there that's really important for people to think about. And that is you as an OSINT investigator, your privacy. Now, some of you like Nix and Ritu and John, I know that you three, at least, Christina, tell me if you're in this bucket too, but you had very private profiles in your social media when you were doing more sensitive work or more law enforcement work. And then you decided to kind of become more public at a certain point. Can you three just tell us a little bit about your experiences there? What were your thoughts? Why did you do it? All of those things. I'm going to just let any one of you pick.
No one wants to talk.
John, you've chosen yourself. Excellent.
All right, great. Having done investigations and security work for decades now, I'm just sort of a private person. I don't see the point of putting personal information, certainly about myself, out there, because I have certainly utilized that as an investigator to other people's detriment. It kind of boggles my mind sometimes to see how much people share out there on the internet with literally the whole world. Like it's hard for me to get into the head where that makes any sort of logical sense to me.
I don't get social media.
Yeah.
It's the extrovert.
Yeah.
I mean, and I'm not an introvert, really. I just don't see the point of putting that information out on the internet. I
Well,
have
I think you see the
tons of
risk,
friends, and in
right?
person, I share things, but putting something on the internet that's going to be there forever, that someone in Russia or China or whoever is going to access, is something different than my actual personal life, right?
So you stayed, and so would you say it's fair to say that you stayed more private when you were doing certain types of investigations because you were concerned about attribution, and you just knew what social media could be used for and how other people could use it against you and your family?
Absolutely. I mean, as a private investigator, I had people, after I testified against them in court, follow me. I've been threatened. I mean, I think a number of people that do that kind of work have run into that sort of thing. So I wasn't necessarily hiding, but I didn't see the point of putting myself out there either, putting pictures of myself on the web and say, hey, I'm going to be following you next week. Like, why would you do that? Right.
Right. Okay. Ritu, next. Oh, we're getting a little echo. Can you make sure to mute your mics? John, maybe? All right. There we go. Cool. Ritu?
Yeah. For me, I think it was baby steps when I initially started. I was a little more careful, but also I think now that I'm more out there and, no issues there for me. Again, it was baby steps because I was unsure in the beginning. But not only that, my role changed as well. And so, the type of work I was maybe previously doing versus what I'm doing now, less sensitive, different things. I kind of had to evaluate my threat level. And again, I don't share a ton of photos and all that stuff online. Again, I keep my personal and my work separate. So for the most part, at least.
Well, let's talk about that for a second. I'm not going to call you out or anything here, and but I guess that's a really good concept that you can be on social media as a work persona. I'm Web Breacher, all these places, but I also have other profiles that are Michael Hoffman's personal profiles, and I post different things to a different audience in those areas. Same thing for you, Ritu, or is that not the case?
No, definitely. I can relate to that. I think for me, it's that keeping that safe distance between myself and my work. And if you ask how I do that, we create sock puppet accounts. We do research accounts, keeping my work devices, my work computers and my personal devices separate, that kind of stuff. I think essentially it's avoiding that cross-contamination, I guess you could call it. And also, I think for anyone who's trying to figure that out for themselves, it's really defining what your threat level is, and then, working within that, and defining, and I'm talking about operational security here. But yeah, that's kind of how I've looked at that.
Okay. How about you, Nix?
It's kind of strange.
Did you hear what I said?
Yeah.
How about you, Nix? Get it?
Yeah, I like it.
Yeah. I just invented that joke. You can use it whenever you want. Not funny. I get it.
I think I was, because personally, in my personal life, but for many years now, I've never really used social media. Partly because I don't like the business model of the social media companies. I think they're very intrusive. I think their business is effectively surveillance, and I don't like them. So for me, yeah.
Tell us how you really feel here. Yeah, I like other people to use them just fine, just not me personally.
Yeah, but for me, social media platforms were somewhere where I did work because it was necessary to do work. But in my personal life, like I think I still have a LinkedIn, and obviously I have a Twitter account, and that's it. Yeah, it's not that I'm like massively introverted or don't like it. I just didn't have. So the social media world was where I did my work. It's not where I played, if that made sense.
Yeah.
But in terms of keeping it all separate, I think, and when I worked in law enforcement, and still now to an extent, is you firewall everything. So there is a complete separation between what you're doing in your day job professionally and your personal life. So use separate networks, separate machines, separate VMs, separate accounts, separate phones. Everything is separated. So when I worked as a cybercrime investigator, often a lot of the time, even the people I was finding and who were arrested and went to jail, they would never have known, even if they look back, they would never have known that Stephen Harris, was investigating them, because there's, even when I get my evidence, there's a firewall between that and it actually being presented to the suspect. So having, keeping everything very strictly separate, I guess, so there's no leakage. So even if the people you're looking at don't have high capabilities, that's fine. But if they do, and they were to look back at you and look through their server logs and look through who's been looking at them, would they be able to still see you in there if you've done it properly? Hopefully not.
So I get what you're saying there, and I think Ritu touched on this too, and I know that Christina and John would agree that, yeah, when we're doing our work, we're going to be using those research accounts. We're going to be creating that barrier between us and our targets, whatever they are, websites or whatever. What I'm more talking about, and that I think might be more interesting, because not a lot of people are talking about this, is you personally deciding what to post and where to post it. So when you, Stephen, decide, hey, I'm going to tweet this out, do you think, well, Twitter is something that I use for my work stuff, so that's going to be promotion of this and that stuff. But over here, I'm on this platform, and that's all my backyard barbecue, running, biking type of thing. Do you separate platforms so that one thing is for more like self-promotion and one is more for that personal stuff? Or are you not using the social media for your personals anyway? Stephen?
Yeah,
and then Christina.
Oh yeah, I mean, I don't tend to use social media much for personal stuff anyway. I like sharing photos, things with family and things like that. When I put something on Twitter, like I post photos when I go walking, cycling, things like that, I always have to think like, well, what's the risk to me, like, if I do this? That's what about, like, so I post a photo, I go out in the woods somewhere, and a couple of people come back to me and say, I found out where you were. Like, okay, but so what? Like,
yeah. Good for you.
Well, good for you. But are you going to come to my house? And no, of course you're not. So yeah, you have to, I kind of risk assess what I put out there, and think through it a bit more. What would it look like to someone who was really hostile? But yeah, I don't worry about it too much.
Cool. Christina, I want to give you a chance to share your thoughts on this.
Yeah, I have a very similar approach to Stephen. I separate personal and private very much. I only have one personal account on another platform, and still I don't overshare there either. And then what happens is when I post something a little bit more personal on Twitter or on LinkedIn, where I'm more open and more work-oriented, I will still do my threat assessment as well and see what is the worst thing that can come out of it, what is my risk level of having this information out there. And of course, the times that somebody's going to point out, yes, you can use this information for a social engineering attack, well, I have to say that it's one thing to provide information that can be ground for a social engineering attack, and another topic altogether to respond to it. So if you receive an approach, the way you respond back will matter as well.
I think that's an important part too, is that in order to protect ourselves and our families from people misusing the personal data that we might share, we understand at least many of the things that can be done with that data, whether it's collecting it in bulk and analyzing it over time, or geolocating, as Nick said, or other things. We understand the kind of, what could somebody do bad with that? So here's a question for any of you. How can other people learn that realm of, I shouldn't post this because somebody could where do you go? What do you do? I mean, are we talking classes or reading blog posts or just watching on Twitter for, some hashtag? Where do you go to learn about these things?
I think just like with a business and their, security risk assessment, people need to do that for themselves as far as what is my risk? What am I willing to put out there? And this is going to be different for everybody. I don't know that it would be difficult to kind of teach a class on it other than learn more about OSINT, because you can learn about privacy risks. Like everybody here that's talking right now could probably access many people's accounts that are listening to us on Facebook and other social network platforms, unless they're really, really locked down. So it's really up to everybody to understand how easy might it be to access data that I put out there? How can I maybe better tweak my privacy settings and so forth? And then what is my risk? What am I comfortable with? And that's totally different for everybody.
Yeah, I love how you threw in the privacy settings there too and tweaking those. Christina, were you going to say something, or somebody else?
Yeah, and still when you receive an approach from a stranger online, you need to exercise critical thinking and evaluate for yourself what could possibly go wrong or not. And another thing that we do a lot between us, I think, is try to vet some individuals that are persistent to see whether they are, first of all, a real person and anybody else knows them in the community, or a complete stranger, because it matters.
Yeah, there's some, as you're mentioning, I mean, Christina, there's some social media platforms where people just follow us, right? I mean, Twitter, I mean, I don't want to make my account protected, so anybody can follow us on Twitter. But on those other platforms that we might use, being able to vet and look into the profile a little bit of who is this person that wants to connect to me is important. So kind of doing our open source intelligence work on this person to make sure that it isn't somebody that may be looking to do some harm to us, or just, maliciously collect data, or just spam us. I mean, honestly, there's a lot of that just going around, just people saying, hey, buy this, or you should buy this, or whatever.
But even on Twitter, when you receive the private messages, and somebody might have legitimate questions, or they might want to really engage in a conversation with you that you don't always know whether it's innocent or not. You cannot know that.
Yeah.
And the reality is that anything you put out there on the internet, whether you have it in some private account or otherwise, could at some point be taken, leaked, breached, and posted out there publicly. I mean, that is the fact of the matter.
Well, and one of our listeners actually, or attendees, whatever, live streaming attendees, Zewin, I know I'm messing up that name, Zewintek, who's over at the Searchlight Discord, says basically the same thing that you all are doing, that separate your accounts, consider the populations that you're sharing information to, and siloize them, containerize them, so that everything stays separate. And depending upon how good you are at that, it could last for a while, but there can be mistakes too. I don't know if you've ever done this, but I have multiple Twitter accounts and they're all on my mobile device. And at 6 o'clock in the morning, when my cat wakes me up and I can't go back to sleep, and I'm like, oh, look at this. This person said that. And I reply, I'm like, oh crap, I did that from the wrong account. There can be spillage between those different work and private accounts as well. I'm
going to suggest, Mike, the way to fix that is to not have any private social media accounts.
Okay, delete all private social media. That's just for us, though. That's not for the people that we're researching, right?
No, everyone that we're researching, anyone doing criminal or shady things, please have a lot of public social media accounts.
Have more public service announcement from John Turbush. Excellent. Yeah, and so the tips we got are siloize or containerize your profiles, vet who you are going to be approving to have access to your different platforms, and realize the threats to your data and when you post. So, other tips?
I was just going to mention, and I think it's already been covered, but like at the end of the day, whether you have your personal whatever platform, you post things, maybe personal photos, that kind of stuff, you're gone out on a hike with friends or whatever it is that you do. The way I look at it is, before you post, and that's the question I ask myself, I'm like, if this was to be leaked out, what harm could be done? And that's a good question, just because, you know, like you'll never find, if I do have a personal account on one of the platforms out there where, you know, there are photos if I'm going on a hike or whatnot, but you won't see me post in front of my house, you know, identifying, hey, this is where I live. Yeah, it's open, you know, that I'm Canadian and I live in British Columbia, but oh my God. But, you know, you won't see those sensitive photos identifying my exact location or where I tend to hang out all the time or that type of stuff.
So let's dive a little bit deeper into that. Because one of the things you're kind of hinting at, or I was thinking about, maybe you weren't thinking about, I am, is disinformation, right? Like, Ritu, if you're really big into running, you're not going to probably create a Strava account. Well, first off, you're going to be careful on the platform that you choose to make sure it actually protects your data. And then you're also might not sign up in your real name or you might use some variation. Is that kind of accurate?
Definitely. I think that's a really important part to think about, because some of us have really unique names. And when it comes to that, you want to be sensitive to where you're creating your account, just as you mentioned, and, you know, some of that disinformation, as you want to call it, or, you know, say you use an alias or you create an alias and you're like, hey, this is me, and only your personal circle knows. I think that's important. Just so I'm not like, hey, I'm Ritu Gill on Facebook, which you will not find me there. But for example,
well, actually, I have an account for you on Facebook. My
right?
sock puppets on all the platforms are Ritu Gill. Wouldn't that be a great disinformation campaign? We can make sock puppets in each other's names.
Yeah,
Our friend Nico Dakins at the OSINT Summit was talking about how he basically plants false information, addresses and things out there. I mean, that is a strategy that some people use. Definitely, if you have a unique name, muddying the water will make it harder for somebody that wishes you ill.
Yeah, right. And John, if we can talk about you for a second, not trying to out you here or anything, but I mean, some of the strategies that we use in open source intelligence to connect accounts are things like, you know, looking at the avatar and doing reverse image search, searching for the same username, searching for other pieces of data that are consistent across profiles. But I think one of the things that you do is you change all of that, right, with your profiles to make it more challenging to find data about you across different
platforms. I mean, I only have a couple, literally, like Nick's. I don't have a lot of social media stuff going on other than sock puppets, which I have for everything. But yeah, I don't have them linked really in any way. The avatars and imagery and names are different. That's certainly something you could do. And one thing that's probably not a bad idea is to sort of do some OSINT on yourself and see what information is out there. Is there a leak somewhere, stuff you weren't aware of that is out there? And hey, can I fix that? Often you probably can't, you know, certainly if you're in the US, you don't have many protections as far as your phone number or street address or any of that, but there might be some leaks from maybe a friend's social media profile or something that you could tighten up a little bit.
Yeah.
I think that's a great point that Gumshoe just brought up. But I think asking yourself a question when it comes to what you're trying, a good question. What are the privacy laws in the country that you reside? And what I mean by that is, are you well protected? What is included in, say, public records? And then assess, kind of assessing, because hey, even if I don't post, but say maybe I do live in the US, but I know public information can be quite out there. So if I'm married, if somebody, you know, tries to find that person online and that person's posting all this stuff about me, you know, so again, it's there's a few things to think about, I guess I could say.
Well, and yesterday in the summit, we talked about the weakest link of an OSINT investigator is many times the people that they're around them, spouses, children, parents, colleagues that don't get the operational security. And one of the panels we talked about.
I'm sure all of us have stories about some subject we're investigating and they have lockdown accounts or not many accounts, and we find family members and there's just a smorgasbord of information on them there, right?
Almost always.
And yeah, and it's
Always the mum or
often
the
the
grandma.
fastest.
Wait, what did
It's
you say, Nitz?
often
I said it's always the mum or the grandma, especially if they're very proud of their criminal offspring and they put
Proud of their criminal offspring. Okay.
Here he is with his new car and his new house. Yeah, every time.
And
Or most of the
Christina,
time.
what were you saying?
Yeah,
Christina?
I totally agree. I think it's usually the fastest way to reach information that's very essential to an investigation when you approach the weakest links, the people around the target.
Yeah.
But we did discuss a little bit in the summit as well, educating the people around you, your family or friends, and having casual conversations about OPSEC and why it's actually important. Because we had a few people in Slack saying that, yeah, I've had these conversations, but a lot of people in my environment do not believe in OPSEC at all.
Yeah.
And
Hard to
Hey.
get everyone on board.
Yeah. Hang on
Everyone's
one
got
second.
different profiles for this too. Sorry.
Yep.
I mean, like what I consider to be something I'm worried about, probably a lot of people are not worried about at all. And you know, that's okay.
Yeah.
Everyone has their own sort of tolerance for these things. And the reality is most people can put their street address out there and pictures of themselves on vacations and all this stuff, and nothing bad's going to happen to them.
But you know what? It's also the mentality, nothing bad will ever happen to me, because we work in this environment and we have seen things happening, or we have used things against others for security purposes. But when you do not have some sort of experience with these things, you might very well just shortcut the whole mental process and say, this would never happen to me, and just dismiss it.
True.
All right, so hang on one second. I just want to take a brief station break. Everybody, we are OSINT Curious here, the OSINT Curious Project. We are live streaming on Twitch, on Periscope, and on YouTube. And we are talking today with our colleagues here about privacy and being an OSINT investigator and doing things on the internet that, well, we do to other people. How do we stay safe as people? So back to the conversation. One of the things that was mentioned was information about looking up yourself, Googling yourself, performing that research, but not just on yourself, on those other people around you that could be sharing data. And I just want to throw this little tip in there from Kirby Plessis, a good friend of ours, who has given some talks about doing things with RSS feeds. And instead of just Googling yourself one time today and saying, well, there's nothing out there today, setting those Google alerts, setting other alerts out there to watch for when the next thing is indexed, and then you get essentially an alert into your centralized alert tool like Feedly or some other site, so that you can kind of have that sensor network out there and constantly monitor what's out there. But
I do that. That's kind of an easy thing to do once you've sort of done a little footprint of yourself, and that way you can keep up with anything new that pops up.
I'm wondering, for some of you that have more unique names, I mean, I thought Michael Hoffman was pretty darn unique, but it turns out there's like 20 of us or more in the United States, and we all have varying degrees of publicness. I'm wondering if having a more unique personal name is something that is more challenging for you all to perform to protect.
Of course it is. I mean, as an investigator, you know how hard it can be to find the John Smith or somebody and try to sort through all that mess on the internet. So if someone has a really distinctive name, like, that's a good day for you. This is going to be easier to do.
So in those cases, maybe you'd use more disinformation.
You might have to do more things like Nico does, where if you're concerned about it for real, planting some incorrect information out there, making it look like there's 4 Nicos out there instead of maybe 1.
I have to kind of laugh. I'm looking at our OSINT Curious internal communications, and I see our newest advisory board member, Jane Litvinenko, says, don't start disinformation campaigns. So I was like, okay, yeah, quite well taken. Quite well taken. But I I mean, we're talking about privacy. We're talking about, keeping your family safe and you safe. And for some of the topics that we're investigating, whether it's hate groups, organized crime, or just, the run-of-the-mill criminals, there is risk to us, even if we do everything right, because my coworker might go ahead and blab, hey, just finished a great case on the such and such family, and Micah did a great job on it. That wonderful praise which attaches somebody to an investigation can be really, really damaging to us personally. Wow. Okay, other thoughts?
So one thing, in terms of keeping up your skills and learning new stuff in this area, I always find I have my greatest sort of privacy changes and revelations after you've discovered someone else's weakness. I think, oh my goodness, that applies to me too.
Yeah.
This is so true.
Yeah, I can't believe he's left out there. And I check myself, oh my goodness, I've done it. Like, there's nothing like finding someone else's weaknesses to learn about your own, for sure.
Yeah, and we always talk about how our ability to, there's an inverse relationship between our ability to OSINT somebody, perform OSINT somebody, and the amount of privacy they have versus when their privacy goes up, we can find less. So sometimes when we find a lot about somebody, and we have to turn that view onto ourselves, going, "Hey, I use this application too." Now, let me ask you this. I mean, while we're going on, have you ever decided to get off of an application or a platform because of the things you were able to find in investigation about somebody else? So you went to a site and you're like, wow, this doesn't really have a lot of security here. I need to get off of here personally.
I would say for me, that was Facebook many, many years ago, because I was at one point I was on Facebook. That was years ago. With in my real name. And I ended up just, once I started doing some of OSINT work, I realized, hey, well, that's a pretty leaky database, if you want to call it. And I just felt, with certain graph searches, maybe that, running them on certain subjects of interest, I found a lot of information. And then I started asking myself, I'm like, well, hold on, if I'm finding this about person A, well, what could they find about me? So I just took myself off the platform completely.
Okay.
Yeah.
Other thoughts? Have you ever jumped from a platform because of what you were able to do?
I would say no, but only because I have the advantage of being security aware before these platforms were created. So when Facebook came out, it was like, why would I put my information on there? So I never was on them. But I think a lot of people came of age while these platforms were already in existence. They were teenagers or whatever, so they hopped on them. And this is an investigative technique I'm sure a lot of us have used as well, going back in time, finding old WHOIS registrations and other things like that from before people got into criminal activity or whatever. So there are plenty of people that were less privacy oriented in the past, and that is also somewhere where you can find stuff on them too in that background.
Yeah, one of my favorite things used to be searching for certain terms in somebody's social media that says something like, oh, today I deleted all my tweets to get more secure. I'm like, okay, let's go to the archive.org and see what they know about you. Because now you kind of you've kind of put that mark in the sand saying, I know that people are looking at my profiles, or something I just did was embarrassing, or I don't want people to find it. It kind of draws attention. So a word to the wise, if you do end up deleting your profiles or data or whatever, don't announce that you've done it. Just do it. It's okay.
Or Micah will find you.
That's right. I have ways of finding. All right. Cool. And one of you mentioned that your ability to protect yourself and to remove data from the internet about you or prevent it from being shared really depends on what country you're in too, right? Because Canada, the EU, United States, we all have different UK, all have different laws regarding data privacy. How does that factor into what you know is out there about yourself?
For example, in Europe, we have the GDPR, and if you see things about yourself that you don't really like coming or leaking through a platform, you always have the right to be forgotten, as we call it, and you can request that platform to delete all of your data, which is beautiful. I love it.
Stop rubbing that in our face. We're going to get privacy in a couple of decades. Don't
No,
you?
so thankfully we have that law.
And in Canada, like, I mean, the difference I see, like, especially with the US, because we're so close, but I think that with public record searches, so I'm not worried about somebody jumping on like a public record search, because we don't have that publicly available, where someone could just be like, hey, where does this Ritu Gill character live? What's her exact address, or who is she married to? That type of stuff. So that makes me feel a little better. But that's part of the assessment, I guess you could say, when you're assessing your own kind of, whether it's digital footprint. I guess that's a word I like to use sometimes. But yeah, so I think that's definitely step one of determining what steps you're going to take to maybe look into your security or your privacy online.
Yeah. So you do have to, one, limit what you're putting out there, two, make sure that you understand what's out there about you that maybe other people are sharing, or other companies or other platforms are sharing. And then three, I guess, would be the removal, which, depending on where you live and and what the rules are, that you may be effective in that or not. All right, cool. Well, thank you all. Let's go ahead and just do a little shift in topic here. One of the other things that we wanted to talk about was the continuous type of conversation of tools versus methods. There's a huge push on a lot of the sites that we see is tool for this, tool for that, tool for this. This is the way to OSINT, is run the tool. This tool does everything. This tool does not. This tool does. And I think, we've been trying to champion the fact that, yeah, tools do help in some regards. And I'm interested in hearing your thoughts on tools versus methods. What do you start with? If you are new to the world of OSINT, do you go and learn how to do all the things? Do you pick a tool and see what it can do and then dive in and then figure out how it works? What are your suggestions?
One thing
go ahead, Ritu.
Oh, I was just going to bring up a kind of an old example, but when Facebook graph search started, a lot of people, and this was many years ago, I guess, I don't know when exactly it started, but a lot of people were just using, whether it was someone's created tool where it would create the URLs for you. Some people didn't really understand how to create the graph searches on their own. And for me, I was like, okay, well, if I have to go to court or I have to explain how this works, I wanted to be able to build my own graph searches. So the tool was good because it, automated and it made things easier that way. But if anybody asked me, hey, how did you, can you recreate the process? I was able to. So that's just a quick example of understanding, I guess, how something works. I think that is important, depending, again, I'm coming from the law enforcement perspective, sure, and that might look different for someone else.
And Nix, you were going to say something.
Yeah, I think people need to understand, first of all, why they're doing a particular piece of OSINT. So when you start with your pen and paper, or however you start your investigation, you have to set some parameters first. What am I actually trying to find out? Who am I actually trying to find out, things out about? And that will determine that's your method. What do I need to know? What do I need to find out? And only once you've done that, then you pick your tools to answer the question that you set out with. If you do it the other way around, so I like this particular Python script, or this $50,000 tool that my company just bought, whichever. If you start with a tool, you're kind of limited by the scope of that tool, and you might not achieve what you actually want to achieve. So, I mean, there's that saying, isn't there, that if you have a hammer, every problem looks like a nail. If you have this one particular OSINT tool, it looks like you can do everything, but it's the wrong way around. You have to start with knowing what you actually want to find out and how you're going to do it, and then you pick the tool to do that particular task. You have to have methodology as a foundation first.
So requirements gathering within
Absolutely.
an OSINT investigation is extremely key to staying on track and picking your TTPs, right? Your tools, tactics, and procedures that you're going to use to achieve that goal. But without that, you're just grabbing all the things and hoping that you're doing it. Okay.
And I have to add to that when you start with a tool, you limit your thinking as well. You just you limit your thinking to what this tool can provide to you, and you might not just think more analytically and more broadly into what do I actually need to find, but to what can I find? What can I find through this tool? You know what I mean?
Yeah, and
absolutely.
as Trashpack, one of our listeners points out, and it reinforces the fact that, analytical thinking is very important. And it's not just analytical thinking about what's the process I'm going to use, but it's about, like you were saying, Christina, when I get that result back from a tool, how did it get it? What else is out there? Because a tool might just grab an email address from a site, but there might be a huge bio that goes with it that you're missing unless you do it. John, you were going to say something.
If you're focusing, again, starting from the tools, you're almost certainly going to be missing things because there's no does everything comprehensive tool, right? There just isn't. And you can certainly make use of tools, but you should be aware of exactly what they do and certainly what gaps they have and things that they do not collect. I like to test with things and see what isn't this getting that maybe it should. That information's out there, it's on this website or blog. Does this tool get it?
Okay. So let me shift the go ahead, Christina.
Last point. And sometimes you might need a piece of information that you do not have a tool for, or that you haven't happened to come across a tool that you can use, in which case you either need to do research to find a tool that can help you in that, or just find a completely different way to apply an open source research to get to that information, in which case, again, you need to have an open and analytical mind to get there and not stick with like, do I have the tool to get it done? Yes. If not, then I cannot get this piece of information. It's over reliance.
Well, and you brought up a neat idea there too, is that, I almost liken it to that matrix port in the back of your head where I don't have this existing knowledge. Let me just go ahead and learn about it so that I can have that existing knowledge. I can't tell you the number of people that come to me and just blink twice if this happens to you. And they say, I want to get into the world of OSINT, and can you send me some sites to look at? Or can you tell me some tools? And I'm thinking, okay, don't start with a tool. Start with the
focus
process.
On that investigative process, right? This is all investigative work. If the tools don't work tomorrow, what are you going to do? If the internet is unplugged tomorrow, I could still go find information out on people. You need to have that idea of, this is the information that I'm tasked with collecting, and what are the multiple ways that we could collect it.
And figuring things out is a big part of the job anyway.
Definitely.
I mean, that's what makes it fun, right? That's what makes it fun. It's discovering things.
Yeah, for me, very much.
Chris Poulter, OSINT Combine, talks about it as creating efficiencies, right? Tools create efficiencies, or they should. They can help you harvest things really quickly. They can help grab a data from a wide variety of sources, or increase your capability. But ultimately, like Nick said, you got to figure out what you need. One of our listeners here, Edmund, says, hey, perform a gap analysis, right? Figure out what you have, maybe to start out your case with, and what you need. And then that gap is something that you can fill, sometimes with tools, but many times with manual analysis and manual techniques as well. So I guess the question is where do you all go? And don't say the OSINT Curious website, but are there other websites that you go to, or other places you go to learn OSINT techniques and tools that to help you understand what you can do in different sites?
Yeah, I always really like to read people's write-ups. When they've discovered a new technique, or they've found a vulnerability somewhere, or they've done an expose on someone, like reading through a good write-up and how they did it. That's why I take a lot of learning points from that. Because
those write-ups would be like personal blogs or like a
Yeah,
Twitter
so
thread or something like
yeah,
that?
so
or-
blogs. Twitter's usually the way in because where people promote their stuff. But yeah, your personal blogs, sometimes company websites, that sort of thing.
Okay. Other thoughts?
Same
I
for
don't
me.
have.
I would
Oh,
say
go ahead, Rito.
I was just going to mention pretty much the same thing as Stephen mentioned. I think reading, I tend to read quite a bit, just how not only like other people are applying OSINT just to get a better understanding, but some people are really good at writing and explaining, how something works. And then I'm like, hey, I have, I like to get pen to paper and write down my takeaways and be like, okay, that's what I took away from that. If there's something that sticks out to me. But I feel reading really does help, whether it's, there's books out there too, but blog posts, I think, definitely is what I learned from.
Okay. So let me ask you this. One of our listeners asks, I'm just going to throw it up on the screen here. For the steps in an OSINT process, I mean, many of us know about the OSINT cycle or the intelligence process, and those are the major steps. But do you all know of a investigative guide that tells you how to go ahead and do an investigative process that is out there and is accessible? I know that most of your organizations have them, that proprietary information of this is how Micah's company does this type of work. But
I can't give you one off the top of my head, but there are some blogs and posts out there about, how you go through requirements gathering and collection and analysis and how it's a cycle. There are different forms of it. But it basically goes through a similar process to that. You need to figure out what you want, how you're going to get it, go get it, analyze it, and then whatever the output is, you have that, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Most of the places where I've seen the methodologies are in people's training classes, or in books that teach you things. The Bazell book that teaches you about OSINT. There's kind of methodology in there, or some other places, some other training places have their own methodologies. But I haven't really seen like a open source intelligence methodology.
But
I'd say,
we actually.
okay.
Sorry, we had this conversation with Matthias a few weeks ago, and we were just saying that everybody has a different analytical process and a different investigative process. So you might, like me, I might have a completely different preferred process than you, and we might even fight about it, but they could both be very valid. So in the end, you collect little gems of information from here and there and figure out what fits to you.
Okay. And Nix, you were going to say something?
Yeah, one area where I know there are a lot of good sort of open public resources is in the world of investigative journalism. They tend to produce a lot of good how to investigative guides. I know there's the digital verification handbook that comes out every so often, and I can't recall the name of it now. But Sam Doubley, who works for Amnesty International, has done a how to investigative guide for online investigators. But a lot of the techniques that belong in good investigative journalism apply across the board. They're not really exclusive, so you can learn a lot from those.
Yeah, I think the focus.
Go ahead, John.
I was going to say, I think if you're really trying to sort of figure out your process, not so much just look at OSINT, but investigations generally and doing research generally is probably where you want to go, because you might be limiting yourself a little bit with just looking up OSINT tips or something like that.
I think one of the most important things I can advise people in the world of open source intelligence is become friends with search engines, and not just for what we can find out about other people, but if they are that matrix port in the back of your head, they are that I need to learn how to do this. Somebody's written a blog post or talked at some conference, or there's a YouTube video or some other video out there about most of the things that we want to talk about or want to learn, including those meta things like where can I go to learn about OSINT or open source intelligence things. Google that stuff, Bing it, Yandex it, I don't care. But you'll get those resources and then look through them and see what resonates with you. I know that Sin Windy's doing a whole bunch with the OSINT Dojo, which is that free training thing where he has blog posts, he has videos, and it's really nice. It's osintdojo.com, and it's really easy to follow.
Yeah, and in the end, no matter what you read, it will never stick unless you apply it and experiment with the CTFs, for example, like you said.
Yeah. Okay. Now, practice absolutely comes into play, right? Whether you're, before we talk about practice, let's talk about trying things out, right? I think Kirby in the Twitch was remarking about how when a new tool comes out, you need to check it out to see how it works and, what if you can extend it as well. But I mean, do you all regularly visit a website that's popped onto the scene to see, hey, is this better than what I currently have? How is it actually working? Or you just stick with the normal tools that you've already vetted?
I'm always looking for new tools and new stuff. So if something pops up, I'm going to test it out, and I may use it, I may not, depending on will it work for me, or it might be something I just kind of put on the side as something, hey, if I'm doing this kind of investigation at some point, that looks like it might be a useful resource.
Okay.
And it's good to test it because it might act as a backup in the future if your current tool doesn't work anymore or becomes outdated, all of that stuff. So
testing. Do you test it out with known information? Like maybe you join some social media network with John Doe or John Smith or whatever, and you plant the information, then you can run a tool against that sample account. I wouldn't necessarily run a tool on myself because if I'm testing it out, I don't know necessarily where that data is going or how it works.
I do that, but usually with some known information. I know this person is on the platform, or some, you could just randomly find people and test stuff on them. Or like I'll sometimes take someone that maybe I know some information about, but they were someone I went to school with or something. So I know some basic information about them, and I can sort of validate to some extent and figure out, is this thing working right? Is it valid or not? And then also, when you're testing, especially if something that might share or leak some information about what you're doing, keep an eye on that as well. Like, what is this tool actually doing in the background?
Yeah. Other thoughts about tools? No. Okay. Yeah, there's so much that you can go into, right? There's the testing it out, the what does it do, how does it do it, and I guess the ultimate thing is does it work for you in your investigations? I've seen some amazing tools out there. I'm like, this is great, but I'm never on that platform. None of my targets or my investigative work even take me into that whole area of the internet or dark web. So it might be a great tool that's not very useful right now. But John, like you said, you keep that list. Ritu, you keep a whole website of links and tools that you like, right? You keep your favorites, right?
Yeah. Definitely, yeah. And I think I know a lot of us have our own websites and, we have tools out there, but a lot of, even I have my personal checklist, if you want to call it, when I'm actually working on a file where I'm like, hey, where would I go if I had someone's real name and they were, say, from this country or that country, or if I have someone's email address, what are the possibilities? I don't have that exactly on my website, but I have those. Those are good things to collect yourselves, right? Because we all do work on different types of OSINT investigations or research. So I think creating your own, whether you have a mind map of it or you have just a simple checklist or you have a notebook, however you want to track your tools, I think it's important to set that up for yourself.
And for those of you that are watching us, I just threw Ritu's website, osintechniques.com, into the chat. She has a great website with not just tools, but also tips and tricks and trainings and other things as well. So thank you.
Thanks, Micah.
Oh, Igor. Hey.
Mind maps.
Yeah, Igor. Igor says mind maps. I love mind maps.
Love the koala.
I love mind maps too.
And the koala is cool too. Yeah. Well, I mean, but mind maps are cool from my perspective because they work with my brain, but they're cool because you can templatize that information. You can throw your process. What do I need to collect? And Igor from the OSINT Summit said this exact thing. You can set up that template. You know what you need to collect about a process. That's really cool. All right. Well, gosh, we have gone through this hour, something fierce here, or so quickly. I don't know. Words are hard right now. We've gone through another hour of OSINT Curious Projects live stream, and we really appreciate you listening to us. Visit our website. I'm going to just throw it back up here. Our website is at osintcurio.us or osintcurious.com, whatever you want to do. Come there. We have forms for you to fill out if you want us to talk about certain topics on these webcasts or the live streams or these podcasts, however you're digesting this information. Submit your thoughts to us. Heck, if you're in the live stream right now, throw us some topics right now. We'll harvest them out before we shut off. Let us know what you want us to talk about, and we'll do that. All right. And as always, if you're interested in, I'm just going to overload this whole thing with all of the banners. If you're interested in reaching out to us when we're not live streaming, come on over to the Searchlight Discord, bit.ly/OSINT Curious Discord. We have a channel over there on the Searchlight Discord that is pretty darn quiet, and it's just us hanging out. And if you want to talk with us, have some questions, have some ideas, please go ahead and reach out to us and come over there. Also, we do have a Patreon. So if you're interested in supporting our project, helping us keep the lights on. See, Steven's got that light. See that? Thank you for putting that light in the frame there, Steven. That's awesome. Help us keep the lights on, help us pay for the platforms and stuff that we are using. Please consider being a Patreon. Benefits of being our Patreon are we have special events. We actually are scheduling another Patreon only or patron only Zoom with us coming up for the end of this month. So if you're interested, go to patreon.com/OSINTcurious. And for $1 a month, you can be a Patreon patron of ours and come to that. Just Zoom with us with your cameras on. We'd love to see and hear you. All right. Well, let's see. Can you throw... There you go. Okay, I'm just reading the comments. All right, everybody. Well, thank you, Ritu and Christina and Stephen and John for your time today on our live stream here. I got to stop saying webcast. I got to. By 2022, we will. Any last words, Ritu?
No, just thanks for everyone for being here, and we really appreciate the engagement.
Cool. Christina?
Exactly. We appreciate the engagement, the interaction. We are here to give, but also to answer your questions.
Cool.
So throw them out, and thank you for being here tonight.
And I'll just say that this live stream is being recorded. It'll be on Twitch for 14 days. It'll also be on YouTube on our YouTube if you happen to miss it. And also we'll throw it into our podcast as well. Nix, any thoughts?
Nothing other than to say it's been great to have all this interaction with everybody, and I love that we can now, doing this live, we can interact with the people who watch as we go. That it makes such a difference. We really appreciate your comments. It makes it so much more fun. Not that it wasn't fun before, but you know what I mean.
It's more fun.
I think it's more fun too.
Yeah,
for sure.
Absolutely, yeah. It's fun having this live feedback with everyone. We can answer questions real time. It's very cool. Thank you for joining us, and we'll be back. Join us again next time.
Sounds good. Nice finish there, John. All right. So do what John said. We'll be back in 2 weeks with more topics. Give us your comments, your feedback, and well, stay OSINT curious, everybody. See, we're not doing it anymore together because it never worked when we did it together. So take care, everybody. Thanks for watching us today.
Okay. Bye.
Bye.